This episode is sponsored by Relogic Research. Relogic is an engineering, aerospace, and technology company dedicated to solving our nation's toughest defense problems while investing in the bright minds of Huntsville. Relogic is excited to be a part of the innovation and continued growth of the Huntsville community. Visit their website today to see what they are excited about at relogicresearch.com, and all of this information will be in the episode notes. Well, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Clark.
Yeah,
it's great to be here.
I'm excited that you're here. Would you like to introduce yourself, and we'll get started there?
Yeah, my name is Gavin Richardson. I am the founder of TinyMap, and this is my buddy, Eli.
Yep, so I'm Eli Walton. I'm the brand strategist at TinyMap.
Okay, and so obviously, TinyMap's not the only thing that y'all do. So before we kind of dive into what TinyMap is and explain a little bit about that, can we kind of address your backgrounds? Are y'all originally from Huntsville? Did you move to Huntsville? And kind of what does your day jobs look like for both you, Gavin, and Eli?
So for me, I grew up in Athens, so not too far away from Huntsville, but I've been here since 2018 in the city proper, and I absolutely I love Huntsville.
Yeah.
Every time I'm coming home over the interstate and I see that big rocket there, it's like, oh man, that's home.
Yeah. So what does your day job look like, that, Gavin? On is TinyMap the day job, or do you do other freelance stuff, or what does it look like?
Yeah, it's mostly freelance stuff.
Okay.
I have a company called Village Fox Media, and we do mostly 3D animations and art related projects. So this kind of branched out of Village Fox, and then Eli was the one who actually helped me reinvigorate my idea after I sort of reached a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I've like reached my limit on my knowledge.
Yeah.
And then Eli showed me this tool that I hadn't heard of before, and that kind of restarted the TinyMap dream.
Sweet. So Eli, what does your day jobs look like? And then are you originally from Huntsville, or did you move here too?
Yeah, so primarily I run my company, Leary Studio, which does brand and web design. And I'm from close but not here, from the Shoals. So I've been here in city proper, which is a good way to put it, since 2017, and kind of fell in love really quickly. My family's close, so it's kind of central to me being able to get to everyone.
For sure.
And still be in a place that I love and do work that I love. But the company, Leary Studio, and doing web design is kind of how I ended up navigating towards Gavin. I try my best to stay up to date on softwares that are coming out that are kind of taking advantage of new technology. And Gavin was talking to me one day about this idea, and he was like, it's just outside. It's just outside kind of my bandwidth, right? And I'm like, I think it isn't. And I think there might be a way to do this.
Sweet.
Yeah, I've always been much more of an artist than a programmer, and this tool sort of allowed me to use my artist brain instead of my programmer brain.
Okay. So when did you, Gavin, first have this idea for TinyMap? Because you said you were kind of working on that, and then that's when you started the conversations with Eli of like, hey, I don't know how much farther I can take it myself.
Yeah, so I started on this probably close to 3 years ago.
Wow.
Originally was called the Huntsville Atlas.
Okay.
And it was just going to be... It was originally just kind of a hobby project of I like these local businesses. I'm wanting to play around with my 3D skills and do something that hasn't really been done that much before. So as I started putting it together, I was like, this environment that you can walk around the city in 3D would be really cool. But 2.5 years ago, my 3JS skills were not where they needed to be.
Yeah.
And that got discouraging because I was like, I have the artistic ability, but finding a tool to help me bring that to a wide audience.
So you were working on this project kind of on the side as you were doing other projects, just kind of testing out the waters. And then how at what point did you kind of have this conversation with Eli, and then Eli joined on to then kind of expand what you knew you could do with this new software?
Well, it started, I can't remember exactly. It was this summer, past summer, sometime, maybe in the early summer. Yeah. So Eli and I both have an office space at Coin. Shout out to Coin Co-working. Did you have?
I did. I've had Will on for Coin Co-working. So like, it's I got to know Gavin, I guess, through Urban Engine and stuff, and then I got to know Eli through just Coin and getting to know Will. Yep. My office, we're actually recording this right from the first floor of Lincoln Mill, and their office is on the second floor, right around the corner from me. So 2 summers ago, you kind of started pitching this thing to Eli. Eli, what was your first thoughts on, like, were you all in on like, hey, I'm super excited for this, or were you still kind of like, I don't really know what this is going to look like, and I'm still kind of unfamiliar with where the future holds?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I immediately was really stoked. I think he delivered the idea, and probably part of his, like, Gavin probably saw that enthusiasm really quickly. Like, he walked me through what the kind of goal and the vision of this thing was, and I was like, oh, that's really awesome. Like, that's worth some real effort. Right. And so I had just recently passed by, speaking of shout outs, I guess, we're using a software initially called Spline to build kind of our web app. Okay. And, we've had to work through some innovations since then, but it, allowed us a really good starting point. And I think I'd recently come across this, and he delivered me this idea, and I was like, oh man, let me make like a very, very small mock-up of what I think I could do if we work together on this.
Like, and you use that software you were talking about.
That's
to
correct.
Do that first mock-up.
That's right.
So our listeners may not necessarily know exactly what the app does. They've heard TinyMap, but Eli, do you want to talk a little bit about what that initial stage was?
Yeah. So I think when he talked to me, I was like, oh man, this is an opportunity for local businesses to see more real foot traffic, right? For us to give small businesses and places that are Huntsville and mean Huntsville an opportunity to be seen in a way they hadn't before, right? So what TinyMap is the thing that he was talking about. Like, it's a world, right? It's a digital world.
It's 3D.
Yep, 3D interactive, where there are businesses that you would recognize if you're visiting Huntsville or from Huntsville, that kind of deliver you to a new plane of interaction with the city.
Yeah. And so is this, I guess a little bit of a backtrack, but is this skill that you have with programming, is this something that you like either studied in school, or is a lot of the skill that you have to make this possible something you kind of just taught yourself?
Sure. Yeah. It's all self-taught, with the exception of like being introduced to softwares in architecture school. I studied architecture initially, so like I'm relatively comfortable with 3D softwares just right out the gate. I was in school during COVID, so the program that I went through used to be all hand-drawn. Everything used to be hand-drawn, and because I went through school in COVID, they took a hard pivot the first semester that I was there, and they said, all right, well, hand-drawn's not going to work. We can't see each other. You can't turn in hand-drawn work. So they put every single person in my cohort immediately into 3D softwares.
Wow.
So ultimately, I ended up not becoming an architect, but that experience kind of delivered me to this skill set that allowed me to work with Gavin.
And so y'all have both been working on this project now for the last year and a half, 2 years?
Oh, it's not been 2 years. I think it's been not quite a year yet.
Coming up on a year.
Coming up on a year. Okay. And so, but you, Gavin, have been working on this for the last, probably 3 years prior.
Yeah, 3 years prior was when the initial idea came up. And like I said, I kind of wasn't able to bring it past a certain point. So it was on the back burner for a while.
Yeah. And so what did it look like at like that moment? So obviously, like Eli, you were ready to go right off the bat. Like you were like, I love this idea.
Yep.
I love local. I'm excited to make this project happen. Gavin's like, let's make this work. What did then the next, the first, few months after that look like for the TinyMap? Like, was it all hands on deck, just ready to go, or were you kind of brainstorming like, what is it that we want this to actually look like and accomplish before we just dive into it?
Yeah, so I think we had a pretty good idea of what we wanted to accomplish right away. What I wanted was a fun, interactive way to find new businesses. I don't know if I'm allowed to disparage another brand on here, but if you go to a new city and you're looking for a coffee shop or something, you're looking for a good place to go, Yelp is usually the first thing that comes up, and that's not a good app.
It's not normally the best representation on a business. It is honestly the worst representation at the worst time for sometimes the best business.
Mm-hmm. And I don't want to go to a city and look up their top coffee shops in the first 5 are Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts. Like I want to find what makes this city unique.
Yep.
That's kind of the ethos that we took into TinyMap was this is just a fun way to find local businesses. We had a couple people come into the office the other day and were asking about a good place to eat lunch. And I was like, why don't you just go on Tiny Map and drive around and see what you like?
Yeah,
That's perfect. So okay, so I think I'm just blown away as far as like, I obviously love local. That's why I started doing this podcast. That's why I started having these conversations. And then taking this, audio thing that we do, but you're like, let's make this more interactive. Let's make a better way to explore. Like, yes, there's all these different ways you can explore local. You can listen to local stuff. You can watch local things. But you're bringing this into this digital world that you can then explore as the user and see things. How do you go about partnering with businesses, or how do you either select or choose, or Huntsville's a huge small business hub. I mean, there's so many small businesses coming. There's so many small businesses here. Is the goal to have different iterations over time once you launch to then include more businesses, or are you starting with certain ones that you've partnered with to begin with and kind of growing from there?
Yeah, the ones we started with are businesses that we personally find impactful, or businesses that we frequent, the things that kind of represent the city to us.
For sure.
So that's just done on a there's no sort of contract with this right now. It's just a proof of concept.
For sure.
But the goal is to partner with any local business that wants to, any locally owned business that wants to be part of this, can sign up for it.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and it's incredible. It's crazy to think, because it's just like, I mean, in the last, I mean, even since y'all have moved here to Huntsville, I mean, I'm a Huntsville native, grew up here my entire life, and I've seen Huntsville grow. Really, the cusp of small businesses started around the time that y'all got here.
Yep,
and y'all
absolutely.
got here at the time that DHI was formed. Honest Coffee started doing a pop-up in the old mercantile building. Like, this was the cusp of small businesses, and now we're seeing it, 5 years after, 6 years after, 7 years after y'all have been here. I mean, y'all have been here 7 years, and you've seen this small business thing grow. I mean, like, do you see this? I mean, small businesses are obviously important to y'all. Y'all are trying to highlight small businesses. Do you see it hitting a ceiling for Huntsville as far as what small businesses can do, or do you think there's still so many more things that could come here?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room left in Huntsville, and I think that's kind of one of the things that we want to prove, right? Is to say, like, there may be these other places that you would go if you were coming to Huntsville to look for where you wanted to eat, or where you wanted to get coffee, or what gym you wanted to visit, right? And there's a lot of room left for local. And I think we're trying to deliver something to Huntsville that's saying, hey, we have this curated space that represents what Huntsville is, and kind of reminds maybe even potential business owners, oh, there's room for me. Like, what I want to do can happen in this city, and there's space and support for it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, having this new way to explore, I mean, what would obviously the Tiny Map will be launching after this podcast is released. What would the user experience be like for the consumer? I mean, people that are listening that are like, I want to learn more about Tiny Map. What would that first impression look like when they get into this?
So the first impression is the first impression is very important to me. One thing that I really dislike about the modern online experience is your first impressions are always kind of ruined by, it'll pop up, ask you for your location, ask you, can we send you notifications? Do you allow cookies? This kind of thing. Just like constant pop-ups, like asking you to sign up for a newsletter. I was like, this is driving me away from every website, because I'm going to immediately click away if a pop-up comes up. So that was like the number one rule, is no annoying pop-ups.
Right.
So you load in the site, tinymap.app.
Okay.
And the first thing that greets you is planet Earth with our little astronaut kind of rolling around the circumference of the Earth. And then you click through and enter into Huntsville, and you're greeted with these big, bold red letters that say Huntsville, Alabama, and you drive forward and you can knock over the letters. We got physics enabled on the site, so you can actually like knock over a bunch of the stuff in the map.
Yeah.
And then you drive over and see the Space and Rocket Center. You use even though this is all in the web browser, just runs like a normal website, you can use your WASD keys like you're playing a video game on your keyboard. Or if you're on mobile, there's a little joystick.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I mean, and this would be something. I mean, like, and I've been fortunate enough to see y'all's progress on this and like mess around with it myself. And so it's the most it's such a unique experience, and I don't think there's something like it. Like I have never seen something like this, and I think most people that are listening, most people that are either from Huntsville, most people that are just, you know, anybody listening to this, anybody watching this has never, as far as I'm aware, have seen something like this. Was there an example that you saw someone else doing it somewhere else that you're like, I want to bring this here? Or did this really just come off the cusp?
Sort of. The original inspiration came from this French fella named Bruno Simone. So if you've ever spent any time in the 3D web space, which admittedly is like not a huge
very
space.
niche.
Like it's the most niche. But Bruno Simone is like probably the biggest name in that field, and I took his one of his courses, his 3JS courses, to learn the skills necessary for this, and sort of just being inspired by different games that I enjoy playing. Like one game I can't get enough of is like Mario Kart. I love driving around the little guys in the go-kart. So yep. I do what?
Most are with you, I think.
Yeah. So, I think everyone has a soft spot in their heart.
Yeah, for Mario Kart. We love Mario Kart. But I kind of was just like emulating that a little bit and wanted to incorporate like a map. Eventually, I would like to incorporate an actual like Google Maps sort of API.
Okay.
We are working with somebody from Google on that.
Wow. So like, but I did you ever see this sort of software, this technology, this the 3D experience like this used for a city, or has it just been more for video games and stuff like that?
Pretty much just been for video games, which I think is like I love video games, but the thing is, I also like things that are useful, and games are entertaining, but we could do more than entertainment. We could bring education. We could bring commercial growth.
Yeah. And so what does like now, I mean, obviously we're getting close to the launch day, probably going to launch, and we'll probably discuss that in a second, but in March at some point. But what does your, like at this moment, we're recording this in February, what does your roles both look like currently in Tiny Maps, and what does this next, couple weeks look like prior to launch to get everything ready to go?
Yeah, so for us, a lot of the work that's happening right now is trying to finalize things and get the actual software and the actual web app in a position to like be ready for users.
Lots of bug shooting.
Yeah, lots of that for sure.
Yeah, and so for those that are listening, when does that launch date, the expected launch date for Tiny Map, and when can people that are listening to this episode of the podcast, watching this podcast, can experience and use Tiny Map?
Well, actually, you can use Tiny Map right now. The website is tinymap.app. It's live right now.
Yeah, just look out for bugs that we're shooting.
Just look out for bugs. We're shooting them. But we will be having our launch event on March the 9th, and we're going to have a coffee bar, get all our local people here, local business owners, and show them what's up.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll include more information in the episode notes. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this, it'll be in the description of the video for more information on that launch date as more things get finalized. I mean, obviously, y'all are both entrepreneurs. Y'all are both business owners. Y'all are both, you're doing a path that most people don't take, or most people don't want to take because it's risky. What is that skill, or is that desire to be your own boss, to be that entrepreneur, something you've always had? Or do you think that's something that you developed over the last couple of years after college, whatever that might look like?
For me, it's something I've always had. My great-granddad, my granddad, my dad, everybody has been a business owner.
Yeah.
So when it came my turn to have a career, I started working at an engineering firm, and it just felt so wrong that I was working for somebody else instead of starting a company. I just felt kind of dirty every day clocking into work. But I did that for a few years and did get a really good experience through that. And I certainly don't regret that. But in my blood is just an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Probably similar for me, less from a lineage standpoint. But when I was in high school, I started like repairing phones for like iPhones and iPads and stuff like that. And I think my heart has always been like in whatever industry you're working in, just try to do something more valuable and better than your competitors are doing it, right? And so I was living in like the suburbs, and I kind of realized, man, there's all these moms in this little town that have young kids and they can't leave, but their kid recently just, threw their iPad onto the corner of the table and it's obliterated. So I would drive to their houses and I would repair their iPads or iPhones there so they never had to leave.
Wow.
And then I would go to the next house and so on and so forth. So it allowed me to kind of corner this market, and I saw a kind of a problem and a need because they can't leave. They can't take their phone to get whatever, but they need stuff repaired. They don't want glass shards in their child's hand, right? And so I can go and I can fix this problem, and I can provide more value in the same space that someone else is doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole, like, it sometimes takes jobs that you don't like to realize the job that you do like. And I think having bad jobs is a good thing. Like there's jobs that I did in high school that I don't have a desire to ever do again.
Yeah. And
I don't want to do again. Or you have the experience of getting in a corporate job, getting an internship, getting that, and realizing that this career is not for you. I mean, that's what happened for me. And I think that's an important thing. So if anyone's listening and they have that itch to do something, I think the first step is just to go after it. Like you have to start.
Yeah, and TinyMap is here for you if you do.
Yeah.
Like we are starting this thing to support the people in Huntsville who listen to this and say, hey, I think it's my turn to start a business. And we're here to say, hey, it's your turn. And you've got a team who's with you.
And I think that's the one. I mean, I've mentioned in past episodes too. It's like Huntsville is a community that is willing to support you and help you. You just have to be willing to ask.
That's right.
And if you're willing to ask, you're willing to seek advice, you're willing to reach out to people, you're willing to get the no or hear crickets or whatever that might be, you'll be okay. You just have to be willing to just ask. Like just ask someone a question. I think anyone listening and they do have that itch. I mean, like I said, TinyMap's here. I'm here to help. I'm here to support. And we mentioned it in a past, like where people can find TinyMap, but are y'all located on any social media platforms as well? Like where is every place that people can find you? And we'll be sure to include that in the episode notes too.
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram at TinyMap app. And that's our only social media presence is the website, tinymap.app, and Instagram at TinyMap app.
And then if there's a small business owner that's listening to this and they want to help, they want to be a part of TinyMap, where can they connect, reach out to you to kind of be included?
Yeah, we would love for anybody listening to reach out to us. Even if you just have questions or want to find out more, you can email either me or Eli. My email address is gavin@tinymap.app. And Eli's is eli@tinymap.app.
Perfect. And we'll be sure to include all that information in the episode notes. So if there's any small business owners that I've had on that are listening to this, anyone that's starting a small business or whatever, or anyone that just has questions and wants to reach out, definitely suggest reaching out to Eli and Gavin. Well, I mean, it's been incredible to have y'all on. I'm excited. Obviously, it's a fairly new project, fairly new thing that you're creating. I'm looking forward to what the future looks like for TinyMap. I mean, I think there's so much unknown, which is also very exciting. It's a very exciting thing to see. We'll definitely have to have y'all back on in a year just to talk about like, hey,
we'd love that.
What's this first year of TinyMap?
So much planned. So much planned.
And so if anyone's listening and they want to connect with you, I highly suggest connecting with you. All their information will be in the episode notes. But I thank you again for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Clark.
Thanks.